Many people will know the great show you had on the roof of the Metropolitan in just last year, 2011, with those big sculptures, big colourful sculptures above Central Park.
That was completely the other end of what this show is, you could say, they were the big, more muscular pieces. It's another aspect of sculpture. It's the difference between maybe a piano sonata and a symphony.
Most people don't know you for your large sculptures, so it could be a bit of a surprise to see these smaller works which we've gathered together. I was just wondering if there's much of a difference between working on a smaller scale and a larger scale.
I was very pleased, Julius, when you suggested showing in this particular gallery, because it's one of the most beautiful galleries in the world. It's very domestic, and I think to show what you call domestic, my domestic sculpture, I think all my sculpture is kind of intimate, but this is perhaps more domestic than most, what you've chosen.
So these smaller sculptures, they never get enlarged, do they? They are quite independent, quite complete.
They're their own thing, they're that size.
Yeah.
And I think that the word domestic is suitable for them, because in a way they are domestic in scale and domestic in size. You know, you couldn't put ocean in your front parlour.
Somebody might.
I made a lot of my smaller sculptures in my garage, my one-car garage at home, which is about 20 minutes away from my studio in Camden Town, in London. And then I would put the pieces together the way I wanted them and put a light tack on them so they were there. Then they would go down to the old piano factory in Camden Town, and somebody would make them, I would get one of my helpers to make them strongly and cleanly, and then I would look again 3 months after making them, and they would be like new sculptures to me, and I could make big changes, which I often did. Now I do the same thing with the big sculptures, very much the same sort of thing. It's a way of working which I actually discovered when I made some pieces in Toronto in a steel yard, because they had to be made strongly. So I had to go back to England for 6 weeks or 2 months and then come back and take another look. And then I could change them completely, turn them upside down, correct them, add pieces and so on. How you set about it is the secret. If you get that right, you're halfway there.
People often wonder how you know when you've finished a sculpture. And it's that moment, isn't it, when you somehow
Larry
decide.
Poons was asked that question, and he said, when it says yes to you, and I think that was a good answer, because it is, you know, you look at it and you say, it's nearly right, but there's something wrong down there, let's, you know. So you pay attention where it's not right.
So several of them are the result of working with other artists, aren't they? And craftsmen, Margie Hutto, Hans Spinner, Ken Tyler. You've always enjoyed.
Well, I've been very lucky. I've worked with some marvelous people who've been tremendously helpful and bring a lot to the sculpture. This is on sort of workshops away from home. For me, I don't go there with a plan. In the case of Ken Tyler, he brought out a piece of paper, wet paper, which had just been made, and said, this is what you'll be working with. Draw some lines on it. So I just drew a couple of lines on it, and he draped it over a chair And so the next morning when it was dry, these lines were in 3 dimensions. With Margie Hutto, she was working in clay, and she would make flappers and flap the clay. So each person brings something to you, and I think to tune in on what they can give you is such a privilege. And they tune in on what you want to do too. They begin to know your language. So you're really having a conversation. In fact, making sculpture is a kind of conversation. It's conversation with the material, conversation with your assistants, conversation with the people who are working with you. They're telling you things you didn't know, and the thing is becoming a different entity.
I was wondering what you feel the students are really going to get out of this. Many of them from Yale perhaps haven't seen any sculpture before, contemporary sculpture, in their lives. It's a chance for them.
Well, I think Americans are very visually intelligent and very visually educated. So I wouldn't be so sure that many of them haven't seen art before, but students from Yale, and they can go in for an hour or two, or they can go in for 10 minutes, and they can somehow enjoy art, get inside the art that they see there. You know, it's a privilege to be allowed to show in such a sort of such an easy environment, such a domestic environment. Such a welcoming environment, that's what I think it is.